These are from about at least 60 years ago that they were manufactured. They're very unique. They've got a square toe here in the front for skis and a rubberized bottom. The last few days it was quite cold out here, as low as minus 19 Celsius. Today we're hovering just under zero, and today we've got fairly heavy wet snow. You can tell by the way it packs together. Great weather for snowball fights, but it also tends to make your boots quite saturated and wet out here over time. And so I'm going to see over the next 6 hours how well these Swedish military boots hold up in these conditions. We've got a review here today of the Swedish M59 military boots. As the name suggests, I believe they were made in 1959, which makes these like 65 years old now and still going strong. They were made incredibly well. I think this is the spring-fall boot, and I believe there's another edition for winter. I'm not sure if there's a third model that was out for summer, but these were the wet weather boots, I guess, that they designed. And what they did was marry a duck boot or bean boot with a military-style leather combat boot to come up with this here boot. And we're going to show those other boots here next so you get an idea of what we're talking about. This here's a pair of duck boots or bean boots, depending on what you want to call them. They were designed around 1911, I believe, by L.L. Bean. And they wanted a boot that would keep your feet dry in wet conditions. So they put like a molded rubber bottom and married that to a leather upper. The reason for the leather upper was probably flexibility and breathability, so that you didn't have, you know, a molded rubber boot on. We all know what those are like to go out hiking in, and not very comfortable. Take Hefty's stick away from him, he's making noise. So what I've noticed wearing these in the winter time is that the rubber seems to be pretty cold on the feet. So unless you had a liner to go in these, an oversized pair that you could put like a decent boot liner in, they're just not very warm. The upper part here, eventually it does get saturated like any leather if you're out in really wet snow conditions for a prolonged period of time. And once this leather gets saturated, that sinks through into your socks, and eventually that moisture kind of makes its way down into your boot no matter what. So these are great for rainy conditions, but in really wet snow for prolonged periods where the leather gets saturated, they do eventually leak, and they are cold on your feet, so they don't make a very great winter boot. These are the Canadian military combat boots. These are all leather. I've got a couple pairs of these, one for winter time that I can actually fit a liner down in, and it's able to accommodate that in the winter time. And then in the summertime, though, it will still tie tight enough on my feet that I could wear them for season. So if you want an all-around boot, I think the Canadian military designed really good footwear. My experience wearing these in the winter time is that the leather is warmer than the rubber on the duck boots, but it will saturate eventually, and your feet do eventually get wet. So I can wear these out working on an afternoon for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, let's say, in slushy kind of wet snow conditions, and I'll come home with soaking wet feet. And these older model Canadian military boots with the leather liner, they take a long time to dry out. So I think if you were out for a prolonged period of time and your feet got wet, you're going to be in trouble, because it's going to be a really hard time to go and dry these out again. Now on the other far side of the spectrum from the duck boots, you have these here US military muckluck type Arctic boots. And these are meant for dry weather because they're meant for extreme cold. And once you drop below a certain temperature and the snow and everything is frozen, there actually isn't a whole lot of moisture in either the air or in the snow that you're walking through. And so these here are great for extreme cold weather, and they've got a liner in them that keeps your feet really warm. But in our climate here in Eastern Canada, we have far more wet kind of days than what we do extreme cold days throughout the year. And so these here are not very practical at all when you get into wet weather. So now we come back to the M59 boot, and very much like the Canadian military boots, these are a more middle of the road boot that's meant for all conditions. And I think with the rubberized outer here on these boots that keep your feet really dry, these are actually great in a huge range of conditions. They didn't just, put a rubber outer here over top of leather. They actually melted it on and tried to impregnate it into the leather. And it makes this extremely durable and very waterproof. There's no way actually for any water to get in here other than, again, once you make it up to the seams here. Same as on the duck boot. I've had these out now in really wet winter conditions, and my feet did not get wet at all for 6 hours or more. It was actually the only time that I've ever worn boots out working and not had my feet get wet, and that includes wearing duck boots. So I think these are a really fantastic boot. On the downsides of them, I've got ice cleats on these because I found there's very little grip on the bottom here. Maybe because these were designed in the heel and the square toe box for skiing in the winter time, but when you're walking on ice, these give you no traction at all. So we've got a pair of ice cleats on. You don't want to lose your grip when you're out using a chainsaw, obviously in the woods. I also found them a little bit clunky on the feet. It might be again because of the fairly molded feeling bottom. As a winter boot, I also don't like that it's only ankle high. Maybe they thought because of skis they wouldn't be sinking into the snow deep. Yeah, maybe they always wore these in conjunction with a pair of gaiters. That's what I did when I was out in deep snow, and between the gaiters and the ice cleats. And I also have a liner that fits inside of these so that it's like 2 pair of socks. These are really awesome winter boots. I'd say these are a comfortable hiking boot also. When I'm out working, I'm constantly walking, and so I cover a lot of miles, and my feet didn't get any blisters or hurt any. They broke in fairly well for me. If you want a pair of boots that you can wear all seasons through any type of weather, I think the Swedes really nailed it with these M59 military boots. I've been 6 hours in these Swedish military boots from 1960, and my feet are completely dry and warm the entire day. This has actually been the driest that my feet have stayed wearing any other type of boot out here, and so I'm now a big fan of these. I will say they're a little bit loose on my feet, even with the extra liner that I have in them, so they flop around a little bit, but they were still comfortable throughout the day. A little bit heavy, but to have your feet dry and warm while you're going around this really wet snow for hours and hours, these boots are awesome.